Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Obie Fernandez, co-founder and CEO of Record Shop. Obie's passion lies within the Venn diagram where music and technology overlap. With music being the foundation of Obie's earliest memories, he purchased his first turntable at the age of 14, which kickstarted his lifelong obsession with DJing. Record Shop is a curated digital collectibles platform built for the electronic music industry and validated by blockchain technology. Obie, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, excited to have this conversation with you. And we're going to dive into the tech and crypto and NFTs and everything along those lines. But before we do, I want to start off with a music question. And that is, what musician has inspired you the most and why?
There's quite a few. You know what? I'll go with BT, aka Brian Transeau. He's a luminary when it comes to adopting new technology. Over 20 years ago, he was one of the progenitors of trance music, which is one of the genres that I love the most and that I make myself. I met him nearly 20 years ago at this point at a bar when he was spending a lot of time in Atlanta, and I lived in Atlanta, and we sat and talked for about an hour and a half. And he was even though he had already kind of blown up by then, he was so down to earth and so real. And we literally, I had just gotten into making music, and we just geeked out talking about synths and MIDI. And he was kind of, even 20 years ago, pushing the envelope of what could be done with MIDI and stuff like that. And he would go on to actually innovate in a lot of significant ways for what could be done in electronic music. And in the last couple of years, he's really been at the forefront of applying Web3 to music, just always leading the charge from the front. So I admire him for that. And even though I've had a lot of influences, he's definitely one of the biggest. And in fact, we were, you remember Clubhouse, kind of like not a thing anymore, but it was very significant and instrumental in the launching of Record Shop, because I was kind of hanging out a lot and addicted to Clubhouse, and BT was a figure in Clubhouse as well. And there was a particular Clubhouse chat where he described his music as a loss leader for other activities that he was up to, other artistic activities. And he was talking about it in the context of blockchain and artwork and experimental projects and things like that. But I found that so tragic because I really love his music. I'm a true blue fan of his music, his albums, and what he's done. And to hear him describe music as a loss leader catalyzed me towards trying to do something about that. You know, there's such a vast oversupply of music in the world that it makes it really, really hard for even ultra talented people like BT to stand out. And some of the things you can accomplish with NFT technology would appear to have a path out of that situation. So that was very, very influential to me.
I love that. That's it's a great answer because it doesn't just get into, your musical inspiration, but touches on the technology and NFTs themselves. And I think part of what you're getting across that has always appealed to me for NFTs is sort of like the empowerment that it gives back to the artists. And I think there's a lot of that with Record Shop, which is going to be great to get into more. But yeah, before we dive too much into the project, I'd love to know just further to your maybe journey into starting record shop is like, when did you find crypto? When did you get into the blockchain space, and what were your initial impressions? How did it lead to where we are here?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact year. It was maybe a few months, maybe 6 months before Dogecoin was a thing. So this is quite a while ago already.
Yeah, no kidding.
I got into Bitcoin frankly, for buying some stuff on the dark web. I'm not going to go further into detail, but it was a very, very useful thing.
You're not our first guest to say that, so don't worry.
And when I look back at some of the amounts of Bitcoin I had in my wallets at the time and think about what would have happened if I had held on to them.
Those were some expensive.
You're also not the first person to say that. Yeah.
It's pretty freaking painful. My son, my older son, who's like 22 at the time, I mean 22 now. He at the time he was begging me for a gaming PC, as one does at that age, I guess.
Yeah.
and he really wanted a really super expensive video card, and I was like, look, the only way I'm going to get you this video card is if you set up a mining rig. And it was like, what is that? And then we talked about it, and he set up a Dogecoin mining rig, and he mined quite a bit of it, except through a pool, and he never withdrew it. And he lost it in a hack. Like after a few months, and then he got pretty annoyed and stopped. And then it just became a video game, which also sucks for obvious reasons, But yeah, I've been in and around the space. I mean, it was a really interesting thing. And then 2017, I got into CryptoKitties, and that's how I found out about Dapper. And I found it fascinating, this idea that there were these like long-lived objects that could exist in this like global computing space. And I was occupied with other things, mostly trying to like build a music career, but it was in the back of my mind that this was something that could be potentially really interesting to innovate in. And with the pandemic coming along, it kind of hit the brakes on my own aspirations for touring as a DJ. And at that point, so I've been in technology for over 25 years and done some pretty significant projects. And it seemed like the perfect time to give it a shot, marrying music and tech.
And so did you start to see some of those examples? Because it's interesting. You talk about CryptoKitties, that's going back to, OG NFT status. And then really in 2021, early 2021, we started to see like the launch of a lot of NFTs and then some music NFTs. And there may have been some before that as well. But for you, was that something you were kind of already working on and had in mind prior to other projects happening, or were you inspired by other projects? Or can you talk a little bit about your foray into music NFTs specifically?
Yeah, in January of 2021, I was just finding myself with a lot of time on my hands because my other business was going fine and kind of didn't need me. And I was very aware of the NFT thing, and it was like a common topic of discussion, on Hacker News and things, as like a next big thing. Sort of. This is pre-Blau, dropping his significant music NFTs, and I'm an avid vinyl collector, or at least I used to be before becoming a digital nomad. And I have a huge vinyl collection, like 25 plus boxes sitting in a garage in Atlanta. And at the time, I was wishing that there was a way that I could like send those to a vault and get NFTs for them. So I started working on a concept that I call Spin FT. And I registered the domain, and I kind of started on the early stages of doing a startup along those lines and I still think it's a great idea. So anyone listening, as far as I know, no one's working on this, and I think it's a fantastic idea. It's basically a marriage of Discogs, which is a very successful big database of recorded music, and it's also a marketplace where people trade vinyl. But given that many people use vinyl as tokens of investment and just things that they collect, because just obsessively, was like, wouldn't it be easier if you didn't actually have to schlep the vinyl around? You can make NFTs that were derivative of the vinyl, and then just keep your vinyl in a vault. So I worked on that for a little while and then figured out it was like not really the thing I wanted to do. And at the same time, I was on Clubhouse a lot, and there was a lot of talk of music NFTs, and there was just a lot of buzz. And I was noticing what was going on with NBA Top Shot. And I said, hey, this looks like a viable opportunity here to do something very similar to NBA Top Shot with the whole pack drop thing, but for music. And so that was in March. And then we formally incorporated the company, and I've done venture-backed startups before, so it was relatively easy to raise some seed funding and to assemble. I wrote the book on Ruby on Rails, which is a very famous web programming framework. So I'm very well known in those circles and I have a big following. So I was able to get some engineers together. My best friend came on as CTO. He's had some successful exits as well, and put a little team together. Convince a friend of mine named Paula, who runs a record label and who's been in artist management for about 15 years. And over the course of like 2 hours, I turned her from saying, no, this will never work, to being really, really excited. Yeah. So, basically I got convinced my co-founders, and we were off to the races, and we dropped our first packs in August, on August 17th. And it's been it's been a startup grind ever since, pretty much.
That's awesome. And music NFTs, while we're still just kind of talking about the general concept here, a lot of people aren't familiar with what does a music NFT mean, right? It's definitely not the most common form of NFTs by far these days, currently, and maybe in the future. Right. But as of right now, for someone who's not familiar, understand music NFTs can probably be available in many different forms. So what is a music NFT? What are the different maybe types of music NFTs? How would you explain them to someone?
Sure. So broadly speaking, this is just apart from Record Shop, there are one-of-one music NFTs, which is like this is the one copy, whether it's a collectible or it has some sort of rights attached to it. But the most distinguishing factor is this is the one NFT you can get, period, of this particular song. That's one way of going about it. There's also NFTs that have that are essentially securities, in that they represent a share of royalties that are earned by that music. Those can be collectible as well, or they can be used as a financial instrument. And then there's what's generally termed editions or collectibles, which is where there's multiple copies of a particular song. And on Record Shop, we mostly do editions. And those editions are usually lumped in with other projects that do collectibles or digital collectibles. And in the case of Record Shop, our digital collectible has a front and a back, so it kind of looks like a 2D card, a Pokemon card or a baseball card. And they come for artists or for songs or for moments, with a little video. If you don't own it, you just see the front and the back and a description. But if you own it, then they open up and they have digital content inside. So they have videos, they have artwork, and most importantly, perhaps, they have music, high quality, downloadable and streamable music. Sometimes it's one or two tracks. Sometimes it's an entire mixtape or an entire album. And that content can vary dramatically. It can be DJ oriented, it can be listening oriented, it can be rare exclusive cuts, or it can be stuff that's available online. It really depends on the artist, creator that's putting them out.
Interesting. So with the example of, like you said, you can say download music or stream music, I've always thought, when I'm trying to wrap my head around music NFTs, and maybe this isn't where they are, maybe it's where they'll go, or maybe not at all, but like I compare it to maybe today's use of music. So most people are using a streaming app of some kind. When you say you can download or stream with these tracks that might be within the NFT, How does the streaming work? Like, is it tied to a service? Is Record Shop the service, or like how do you like tie into that? And hey, I want to stream my song that I own.
Yeah, Record Shop is a service, so you can be logged into our website, or you can have our app. You can download the App Store, and then that knows what your collection is. And sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, since we're pursuing a decentralization strategy, which basically means that we're going to start giving our artists options to make their music more permanently available via blockchain storage. Then there'll probably be an emergence of other apps that can read our protocol, so to speak,
Gotcha.
and include that music.
I want to go back to something you were talking about before, in the sense of music almost being a loss leader for some of these BT it was, but just in general, how there's maybe a misconception on, in the DJing world, how much these DJs are actually earning. And in another conversation I heard you talk about, it's rare for even a touring DJ to be earning 100K in a year. And I think that that's something that, like, I was surprised by that. I would have thought, oh, if someone's touring, they're probably pretty successful, probably earning that level. But can you just kind of break down, like, based on the traditional system, how it currently works for people who are trying to make a living as a DJ, and then maybe tying that into how something like Record Shop is actually helping it become a more tangible career, for an aspiring DJ?
Sure. That was a long question, man. It is quite common, for non-superstar DJs, there's that thin upper crust, where you're essentially now a pop star. So you're DJ Snakes, the world's, things like that. And they make pop star money, which, who knows, millions, tens of millions, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then there's a really big drop off, to kind of that long tail of people that are, let's say, working class or professionally aspiring. And if you're professionally aspiring in music, you make very little money, like barely enough to survive. Usually you need some sort of side hustle. If you're lucky or, really talented, you can have a side hustle in music. And it's very common to be a teacher or to do commercial work, meaning sync for movies or advertisements or, things like that. Or ghost producing, which means making music for other people, to claim as their own, which is a whole separate subject. But for the most part, those people, like, they're lucky if they can make 100 or a little over 100,000 a year, let's say, on average. For a touring DJ, I would say, if you're somewhat well known and you have maybe like a few 100,000 fans where you can pull, say, a few hundred people to a show, you're probably getting at most 1,500 to 2,000, and that needs to cover your travel expenses.
Wow.
So you put those together, it basically means that it's a grind. You have to pretty much be working every weekend. And as soon as pandemic hit, that means that people that were living, making a living that way, all of a sudden couldn't pay bills, through no fault of their own. It was just the way the industry is structured. But Record Shop's not really charity, like our idea is not to be a charity or whatever. Our idea is just to provide mechanisms that let artists sell what is essentially digital merchandise of different kinds, right? Like, and to me, the value in that digital merchandise is tied into how limited edition it is. So, like, I'm a real big fan of Bandcamp, and in fact, I've considered like putting my own music in Bandcamp before starting Record Shop. But Bandcamp has the same kind of fundamental flaw, as far as I'm concerned, as other download portals, which is that they commodify the music that they're selling. And what I mean by that is that they make unlimited amounts of it available at a commoditized price, usually 99 cents or less per track. And given that music is an artisanal product, so to speak, I mean, it's, practically every piece of music ever made is an artist going into a studio and making a one-of-a-kind thing. Like, it doesn't really make sense fundamentally to take an artisanal product and commodify it. You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So my proposition by a record shop is that there's another model that's just being ignored. And that model is, you make your music freely available through YouTube and Spotify, et cetera, and you don't expect to make a lot of money with that. But you let that kind of be the stuff that people discover you or passively consume your music by. And you also have like the good stuff, let's say. So the concert footage, the exclusive edits and remixes and versions, the acoustic versions, depending on what it is, the making of videos, like the stuff that your fans really dig and want to collect. Like, don't give that away for free. Like, when I was starting out, I would look at people's Instagram streams, and I would see all this production work that gets put into Instagram videos that people put out. And I know for a fact that it's costly because I've done it myself, and then you put it out, and then you have to be fighting with the algorithm, or you have to be promoting posts, which is expensive as well. And it's a rat race that is just very difficult to win. And it's a treadmill that you can't get off, and you can easily screw it up, if you post too often or not often enough, or with the wrong hashtag. It's a pain in the ass, right? And ultimately, it doesn't do anything, other than try to get you more, discovery. And it's just a race that feels like a losing battle, right?
Right.
So I looked at all the energy that's put into that, and I said, if I'm a fan of an artist, like I would pay, maybe not a lot, but I would pay for this material, right? Going back to the example of BT, a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, BT was doing a whole bunch of these walkthroughs of his studio. He's got a fucking badass studio full of synthesizers. He's got a story for each one of these synthesizers. And I'm a synthesizer geek. I was like, all this documentary material doesn't even have to be well produced. Like, I would love to own some of this stuff, right? And maybe I'm old school, but I remember when part of how you established your identity was the CDs that were in your living room, right? Or the records or whatever. You went over to your friend's house and like you'd look through their CD collection, or if you were having a party, you would figure out what you were going to play or whatnot. Like that, having that physical token of your fandom became part of how you represented yourself. And that's like a lot harder to do these days, online.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode. It makes me think of like, I'm sure this isn't the way you pitch Record Shop, but it's like a modern day digitized fan club for fans to connect with their artists and be a part of their club and get whatever exclusive things they get.
There's something to that. I think that's fair. The difference being that now you're actually interacting with the artist.
Yeah.
Whereas, thinking back to when I was a kid and I actually was part of some fan clubs, I'm sure there was some staffer at some record label somewhere.
Yeah. Someone's managing that
fan
club. It's not the artist.
You're not actually talking to the artist. All right.
Yeah.
And what we see in the record shop community is that they are very, very picky about, the level of engagement they get from the artists. And if they get authentic, genuine, exciting engagement from the artist, then they reward that. And if they
Right.
don't, if they feel like they're being exploited, then they say no thanks, and they don't buy it. So it is a new world. I just think it's healthier and more authentic than what we were seeing on Instagram, right? Like you could argue, well, aren't you just recreating a situation where they have to put a bunch of work into something that's not making music? And I would say, yeah, to some degree, but that work is a lot more authentic, right? It's not dressing up and doing a photo shoot, or trying to like the whole influencer thing, and like the whole plasticness of the whole influencer world, and like trying to pretend something that you're not, which Instagram kind of seems to reward, let's say, without getting too far down that particular rabbit hole, right? That whole sort of engagement that Instagram rewards, for a lot of us, I think is getting old, right. On both sides of the equation. Both seeing it all the time just kind of starts to feel toxic, but on the artist side, having to try to participate and keep up with it feels like being on a fucking hamster wheel that's exhausting, and is inauthentic. It's more authentic to me to be in a Discord or have that relationship via Twitter with your fans, and to feel like you're co-creating an experience, right? Like they're helping you decide what to work on next, how to do it. You're making stuff for them, right? And it is a little bit like a latter day fan club, so to speak. But I think it's also super cool in this nerdy way, and the fact that it's NFT backed then means that there's also that real sense of ownership, right? Like that tangible sense of ownership around all the artifacts of that relationship.
Now, there are some other music NFT platforms that are out there today. I'm curious what your familiarity is with what we could arguably call the competition, whether or not they're really doing the same thing you're doing or Record Shop's doing. But like what are some of those other would-be competition, and how does Record Shop differentiate from what they're doing?
There's certainly other digital collectible sites that are on different blockchains and things like that. I think that there's nothing out there right this second that really directly maps to exactly what we're doing, because once you get under the surface of Record Shop, there's a really deep rabbit hole with all the gamification and artifacts and different things you can do with your collectibles. So like most NFT projects, I think it's safe to say, like, what you can do is you can buy, you can hold, or you can sell. And, that's kind of the extent. There's also, let's say, community aspects of being in that community, and the NFT ownership might unlock that community for you, let's say, right? On Record Shop, the collectibles themselves are a little bit more in the order of playthings that you can do stuff other than just transact. So for instance, I think I mentioned that we drop as packs, kind of like a Pokemon pack. And anyone who's collect anything that comes in packs knows that you quite often get dupes, right? So if you're in a situation on a platform like this where you have let's say you bought 10 packs and now you have a bunch of dupes, the only thing you can do with those dupes is sell them. But on Record Shop, you actually have other things you can do with them. You can burn them, which liberates the fungible token that is bound up in every one of our NFTs and adds it to your account. And then there's stuff you can do with that fungible token. You can also mask them together, which means you can take cards that have the same design and stack them. And it like as you put them together, it burns the excess and it leaves you with just one card. So again, that's just scraping the surface. There's actually this deep rabbit hole where, that leads to a lot of engagement, leads to a lot of fun, kind of mystery around some of the things. There's a ton of Easter eggs. There's like fun things, you can throw your card in a porta potty and it turns blue. There's like, there's all this stuff, like that's kind of authentically tied to the world of festivals and electronic music and whatnot. And as we expand, we want to make sure that there continues to be a fun aspect, like a game aspect to why you'd be on Record Shop. And I think that sets us apart from almost everything else, like you have Royal, which is like for sharing royalties, for pop stars and things like that. You have Catalog, which is only one of ones. And I think what you find in record shop, which is kind of cool from a platform perspective, is that as a player or as an artist, you have a lot of choice. If you want to approach it just as a collectibles platform and just speculate on, is this going to be worth more later? Or if you want to approach it as a flipper, for trying to get short-term gains, I wouldn't advise it. But there are people that do make money on a regular basis. I see it. They analyze the drops and they figure out which drops they think will do well, and they buy a whole bunch of packs and then they break them apart and sell them. Or if you want to do more interesting things, you can. Like we have an not really an artist, it's more of a record label called Magic Records. And right now, they were in some of our earlier drops, but they've evolved, let's say, the way that they're using Record Shop to only drop one of ones. So if you look at their current collection, it kind of looks like what you would find on Catalog, in the sense that they only sell one of one, which we call mythical cards. But they're giving added utility to those NFTs in the sense that if you collect 5, then you can hold those 5, and it gives you the ability to decide what one of their next songs is going to be. Because they do a lot of covers. They do like EDM covers of pop songs and stuff.
Cool.
So you could buy 5 of those cards and be like, yo, I want you to make an EDM version of Rocky Horror Picture Show theme or whatever, and he'll do it. And then he gives you 20% of the royalty stream for it.
Really? That's super cool.
So there's a lot of people super interested in that. And it just goes to show we're building a platform, right? So like more and more as we press on, we're moving away from dependency on this the pack drop model, and more on just having a suite of tools that are available to our artist creators to create an experience for their fans.
Yeah. How does it feel to, like that specific use case is probably rewarding for someone who's built this platform to then see it get used in a way that maybe you didn't anticipate. It's not something you built in, right? Is that like a rewarding experience to go through and see how different artists are utilizing the platform? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's some really smart people out there, and this guy in particular, Jeff from Magic. It's just I'd talk to him, I'd give him an idea, he'd go, yeah, let me sleep on it, and then like the next day he'd come back and he'd have some riff on it that was like 10 times better. I'm like blown away. It is definitely part of the reward of building what's essentially a platform, for people to be able to realize their own dreams. And what I'm seeing happen is that as they do that, you could tell that they're thinking more about what the fan experience should be. In the early days, we were kind of just serving up everything on a silver platter to our artists. In a lot of cases, they just let us do all the work, and they just sat back and didn't do anything to tell their fans about it. And that was unfair. Yeah, right. And also not scalable. So So as we've evolved, what we're seeing is that the fact that we're giving them these tools sparks their creativity, and that's what you need. They have to get excited about it. They have to be rolling out of bed and figuring out, okay, what cool NFTs am I going to build today?
You mentioned that Record Shop, no matter what the intention is, whether it's speculation or true fandom, there's kind of an opportunity there. But I would imagine from your perspective, you want more of the true fans to be participating in the ecosystem. Do you have any sort of range on, how many people are doing it? Because let's be honest, in the NFT space in general, there are so many speculators of every project. No matter how tight the community is, there's a lot of speculation that goes on in the space. And so the question is that, do you have an idea of how many people are there for pure speculation purposes?
I don't know. We have tens of thousands of registered users, and on the order of thousands of monthlies, active users. I don't know what proportion are just kind of like pure speculators, but in my blogging and kind of public talking about Record Shop, I've quite often expressed, pretty strong reservations about people that would want to just exploit the platform financially. Because me and several other of the founders, like basically a team behind this project, like we're not in this just to make a quick buck, right, off the current trend. Like, we're all successful in our own right in different ways. For us, and also the age that we're at and whatnot, like, it's more about what kind of lasting legacy can we make, what kind of significant industry change we could make. So I talk all the time about, how are we enabling the next 5 to 10 years of advancement? And we know the music industry is complicated and complex, and I'm not a crypto bro, and I'm not like just a 20-something-year-old Stanford guy who's like disrupt, like it's. I understand the nuance of why there's so much fucked up shit, to use the technical term, in the music industry. There's a lot of intermediaries that occasionally project founders say they want to disrupt, but there's a reason that those intermediaries are there, right? Like, there's a reason that the major music labels work the way that they do. And in a lot of cases, there's very good reasons, and there's fundamental reasons why if you try to disrupt those head on, you're going to fail. So to go back to your original question about how many of those are flippers, in the early days, we certainly had, those speculators, and a lot of them made gains, but a lot of them got burned also because there was a huge run up in our market and we kind of came back down to earth. Keep in mind, we launched on middle of August of last year. And when we launched, it was 7 days. Thanks, Siri. At that time, we were pretty novel, and we got a lot of support from Flow, and NBA Top Shot had a lot of drama, and we got like a lot of NBA Top Shot refugees, over to the platform and stuff like that. And we definitely had a peak of overinflated expectations, and there were people that bought in at that peak. And then if they were just looking for short-term gains, they got burned pretty bad. Right. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those people left, and the people that remained were more about the mission, this mission of revolutionizing music. As we've crossed our 1-year anniversary as a company, is apparent just from being in there every day and talking to the community that the ones that remain and treat it almost like a full-time job, because it's remarkable how many hours they put in to the Discord, right? Like, they're not only going to profit from their holdings. I think a lot of those people are actually going to go on to form cottage industries in the record shop ecosystem, because they understand how to make NFT campaigns. They understand what the artist needs to do to engage the audience with challenges and airdrops and the whole community aspect. And since my objective is to grow a big platform, and I'm mostly looking for user growth, I don't even care that much about revenue right now. Mm-hmm. So I'm lately, for like the last month and a half, 2 months, I've been telling that group of hardcore OGs, on Record Shop, like, hey, I actually want to refer my artists to you. I have like 180 exclusive deals with artists, and many of them I haven't had time to actually get them to drop content. I'm like, I actually want to hook you guys up, play matchmaker, so that you can help them drop their content on our storefronts and help them figure out how to engage with the community. They need it. Mm-hmm. They need that advice. And I haven't really heard anyone else talk about this in this space, how there's more than one pathway to success, in a big technological revolution like that. And it's quite often not just the first order success of I bought this thing and it appreciated and I was able to sell it. It's quite often the second order success of I was there and I'm now ahead of the curve, right? Right. Like I have a year or 2 years or 10 years or, whatever the case may be, ahead of the general public in terms of understanding how this new thing works, which means I'm now able to start a business, a successful business based on that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Something you mentioned just a little while back while answering this was about like intermediaries in the space. And I'm curious with Record Shop, when we're talking about the subject of intermediaries, as far as I understand, and I could be off here, but like Record Shop is an intermediary in many ways, because you guys deal with artists and art, and then the users deal with the platform. And so, am I wrong? Like, is it a one-to-one connection, or like partly what I want to ask here in this question is around the fees, because I was watching one of your explainer videos, trying to grasp record shop myself when doing research for this, and I saw that the fees can be high, like 12.5 to 25%, I believe. And for users who maybe are used to fees on NFTs being much lower percentage wise, they might wonder, why are these fees as big looking, at least, perception wise, as they are. But if I understand correctly, that's because record shop is paying out fees to the artist versus maybe that one-to-one. Am I understanding that right, or can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. So one of the things that's super unique about record shop is that we drop things mostly in packs, although that's changing. And those packs, you can resell them without opening them. So NBA Top Shot doesn't even have that yet still. I don't believe. I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not. But so if you just want to buy a bunch of packs and then speculate on the value of those, we're okay with that, but we want to disincentivize that, because if no one opens the pack, then it's kind of making the music besides the point. The music's trapped inside the pack.
Yeah, right.
So we slap the 25% resale commission on that. That means that it really doesn't make sense to resell packs unless you're really smart about your timing, like getting the pack drops that you think are going to sell out. Some people make a killing reselling packs. Let me just put that out there, but you have to really know what you're doing. It's mostly OGs on the platform that really, really get the dynamics of it. On secondary resale of NFTs in our marketplace, we take a 12.5 commission, of which 9% goes to the artist. So we take a very, very small cut on that. We take a very small cut on the 25% also. That mostly goes to the artist as well. In fact, we're not trying to become like another Spotify or typical music industry intermediary that takes 40-50% of the pie. Over the long term, we want to become a decentralized ecosystem of different components, of which record shop is only one of those components. And in fact, our company is called Let the Music Pay, and we see ourselves more as a technology provider than a creative agency around record shop. In the beginning, and still to a certain extent, we do a lot of the heavy lifting. I employ a whole bunch of creative people, illustrators, 3D specialists, even some music producers, and they do a lot of the work of putting those NFTs together so that our artist partners don't have to. And for that, we take a relatively bigger portion of their revenue, right? Like in some cases, as much as 25%. But that's just because otherwise they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise it wouldn't happen. But as NFTs become more of a mainstream understood thing, or have a little bit more traction with artists, then they are starting to get it. And what we're doing is pivoting to be more of a Shopify, where it's like you come to record shop and you set up your shop. It's the reason I call it record shop in the first place. The idea was Shopify for electronic music packaged in this way. And we trademarked the next format and stuff like that because, we kind of felt like this could be the next format in music. Like people think about vinyl, cassettes, CDs, digital downloads, streaming, and then now NFT-backed music.
You mentioned the burning component there for a fungible token. So is that the token sound? Is that correct? And so for sound, what is the utility of that token? Like, what can I get with sound?
So every NFT minted on Record Shop requires to be backing by sound. And it's that in itself is also pretty novel. Like no one else is really doing this, and maybe I'm crazy, but to me, it provides a mechanism for putting a brake on supply, right? Like it gives us economic controls because the entire music industry is oversupplied with music. There's just too much of it, much more than much more than the public as a whole can listen to, or appreciate. And I don't want to replicate the macro situation on Record Shop. I want Record Shop to be a place where the financial incentives are aligned towards quality over quantity. Yeah, so the mechanism that we choose to do that is to create a fungible token, which has to back all our NFTs. In order to mint on Record Shop, you have to have sound token to do it with. Now, most people, if they're coming on board, if they're established and we know we want them and whatever, we validate that they actually have a fan base, they're legitimate, they're not going to be uploading bullshit or copyrighted content, stuff like that, we'll actually subsidize them in increasing amounts of sound so that they can mint and have a profit margin. But at some point, that subsidy stops and they're dependent on mechanisms that yield sound token back to them via fan engagement. So as a fan on Record Shop, you can showcase music that you like by the artists that you follow, and you can stake those collectibles. And what it does is it stakes that sound token for your favorite artist to get yield. So you're yielding in favor of someone else. And that is what replenishes their supply of sound tokens so they can continue creating more collectibles. Without that cycle back, they can't actually create more NFTs until they bring more fans or engage more with the community. It really rewards the ones that it rewards the ones that engage with the community in a Web3 sense, and it disincentivizes the ones that don't, that just want to come on board and exploit it. Or it also disincentivizes bad actors because it becomes expensive and complicated to.
Yeah, you can't just come and like spam your content and put out a whole bunch of crap. It's like you better give some thought to this and make it meaningful and build a fan base. And
So either, I see it as a situation where either it just doesn't work because it's too complicated or complex to understand, or it becomes wildly successful because there's a positive feedback loop in play. Whereas, the more quality you have on a platform, the more prestigious it becomes to be on that platform. And then, it kind of generates demand to be on there.
So we've had some guests on our show that have talked about music NFTs before. This is the first time we're really diving into a project that's all about that. But, we've had Cooper Turley, for example, on our show, and he's heavily involved in the music NFT scene. And, he's speculating 2022 is going to be the year of music NFTs, that they're really going to blow up this year. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's different meanings of music NFT. Like there's definitely like I would speculate. I don't know Cooper personally, but I do follow him, and we have friends in common, and so I'm kind of familiar with how he approaches it, and my interpretation of what he's doing and Sound XYZ and kind of that section of music NFTs is they're trying to create a whole new music scene of sorts, or it's kind of its own little music universe,
right? And
for better or worse, I'm not interested in that. It's cool. I'm not throwing a shade at it or anything like that. I'm just personally not interested in that because I have certain kinds of music that I like, and I have certain artists that I like and that are part of my network. And in general, I would like Record Shop to be a place where you can come and be able to participate in the innovation present in Web3 without having to become a full-on Web3 nerd, in terms of having, because it's hard. It is a very deep and complicated rabbit hole, especially if you start getting into DAOs and, regulations around, what you can do with them and whatnot. The idea is to kind of straddle those worlds, sometimes they call us Web 2.5, and I'm actually okay with that. Because throwing out everything that made Web 2 successful, I think, is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are very advantageous aspects of doing certain things in a centralized manner. Just to give you an example, the vast majority of artists that we talk to don't want their music permanently stored publicly on a blockchain. You could argue that they're grasping onto an old model. But generally speaking, if you make something and you consider it valuable, you don't just want to make it freely available.
Yeah, right.
And, the models like Sound XYZ, et cetera, kind of require your music to be on chain. And until there's a viable workaround where you can kind of have your cake and eat it too there, with some sort of encryption or protected blockchain resident content, there's no way around using a centralized service to protect the media. For it. So at the moment, Just going back to what I was saying earlier, I think there's kind of different music NFT worlds. And I'm not sure what he means by 2022 being the year of music NFTs, but what I've found is that I think it's just going to be a grind. It's going to be a steady grind, for mainstream music fan acceptance. We don't know if there's going to be a huge crash, this year in crypto along with the rest of the economy. Certainly people are somewhat distracted by high inflation in the US and the war and stuff like that. And I think that does put a damper on how much how much disposable income they want to dump into risky, things like NFTs. So I'm keeping my expectations in check.
Yeah.
And making conservative, trying to make as conservative financial decisions as I can, because at this point, it's starting to feel like a survival game. Like basically whoever's able to survive the next, several years will probably come out on top,
So Obie, this has been a great conversation. We're nearing the end and we ask every guest the same 3 questions. So we'll get to those in 1 second. But before that, I'm really curious about where you see the future going. So we were just talking about kind of whether 2022 is the year for music NFTs, but just in general, kind of like long form in the future. And maybe that includes the metaverse and all sorts of things. But it's sometimes fun to just kind of crystal ball gaze at what things could look like. How do you see the future shaping up?
I think that reality is cyclical. And I think that, you get these pendulum effects. And we've gone through this great bundling where like everything's bundled up and available via YouTube and Spotify, et cetera. And I think the pendulum is swinging the other way towards what they call unbundling, where, more specialized platforms do offer up, let's say, more interesting content to specific audiences. And that's part of what I see happening that's enabled by this space. And I do think that has significance for music NFT projects like Record Shop, in the sense of being able to provide a better, more interesting experience for music fans than what they would get on YouTube. It's always going to be hard to compete with free. And there's kind of like this passive music consumption model that I don't expect that's going to go away. As a music producer myself, I think I'll continue putting music on Spotify and YouTube, et cetera, like at least radio edits and things, so that I can, if I meet someone, I can just say, yeah, look me up, on Spotify, or here's the link to YouTube or whatever. Just make it super, super easy for discovery and for them to be able to check it out. But on the other side of the equation, there's this dynamic of what do you do if you're a fan? And people already buy vinyl as tokens, because like sometimes they don't even have turntables.
Yeah.
Or they don't open them, like if they're buying them because they think, well, maybe this will be valuable, whatever. Sometimes they don't even open it because then it's more valuable. People do the same thing with all sorts of collectibles, right? So I think it's only a matter of time before today's kids, who are digital natives and who treat digital items almost like tangible objects, start growing up and having the disposable income, and those kind of phenomena, blend together, and you start getting some mainstream acceptance of digital collectibles like what we offer at Record Shop.
And just a follow-up to that question, I understand this is not what Record Shop's doing, but and I can also very much appreciate, by the way, your view on like even just accepting the term of like Web 2.5, where Record Shop's almost an opportunity for artists to take part in Web 3 while still operating the other aspects of their music distribution in the traditional world. Because we're probably going to need that before you 100% just jump 2 feet into all things, blockchain. But my question here is, in regards to where the future is going, is there a future that you see where music is all decentralized? And so, like, to your point about free content and using YouTube and putting out your music videos or your music or whatever it may be, that maybe one day all of those platforms artists use, they still just put their content out for free viewing. However, rather than royalties on advertisements going back to the centralized party, the platform, the majority of that goes back to the artists. Is that at all a future you see?
It's hard to see that future anytime soon, like maybe way distant future. But if you look at the way that the industry is trending, a lot of the consumer interest is on back catalog, and that increases every year. And that back catalog is predominantly owned by huge corporate entities, both the publishing and master rights. When I say huge, I mean like biggest funds in the world, are investing in these giant catalog, back catalogs. And something like 70+% of music listened to is back catalogs,
Right.
So I see it with my own kids. I have kids ranging from 25 to 14, and they, like my youngest has been going through a Radiohead stage. And before that was a My Chemical Romance stage. Like the amount of music that he consumes as brand new music is relatively low.
Right.
I think that's a widespread phenomenon, and I don't see that changing very much. And unless those, and then basically because it's corporate entity controlled, they're not going to do anything that disrupts the income streams they get from it.
Yeah, like to your point, that world is only going to be possible likely for new artists, upcoming artists, when that technology is widely accepted. But there'll still always be that huge back catalog of all those big name artists that the corporations aren't going to participate in.
Now, I don't mind saying that one of the things that we're trying to do, and we're actively talking to some of the world's largest publishers about this, is letting record shop users mint back catalog. In the sense of we're basically going to them and we're saying, look, you're leaving money on the table right now. Like, I want to own a one-on-one NFT of my favorite Queen song or whatever, the case may be. So maybe it's not Queen, but multiply that times the millions of, tracks that people know and love and obsess over. And I think there's a model there, right? Like where you can, if you're a rights holder, have your cake and eat it too, right? Like don't give up the existing model, but start adding these digital collectibles that leverage NFT and also make money for them. And in the long term, I think that'll benefit artists, as well, because there's always a contingent of the more future looking artists that recognize what's going on and capitalize on it.
I know I said we were almost at the end, but I have one more question to slip in because I'm really intrigued by this conversation. But if there's any aspiring artists listening to this episode or watching it on YouTube, what would your advice be in terms of how they can leverage Web3 to hopefully get a leg up on the traditional means?
I would tell that aspiring artist that to not see it as a silver bullet. They're going to have to put in just as much work as they would with, previously. It's just that if you put in the work with the previous model, you're kind of like investing in a model that many of us think is going away. So, you might as well put the effort in this new model, because it's a fucking long shot to make it as an artist anyway. One of the very first things I said is that the entire music world is completely oversupplied. And increasingly derivative and increasingly just focused on the whole TikTok model and like pop music and stuff like that. So it's incredibly hard to make it. One of the things you can do in Web3 that I think is harder to do previously is there may still be a window of opportunity to get fans just because you're in Web3.
Right.
Like, just to be totally blunt. Recognize, though, that those fans may or may not actually be interested in your music for the sake of your music, and you got to decide whether you're okay with that. They might only be looking at it as, oh, are you the next hot thing that I can make some money on? Because like you guys said yourselves, right? Like the space is full of speculators. And finally, on that note, I think all of us have to kind of understand and reconcile ourselves with the fact that we're playing into a trend, which could perhaps be called the financialization of everything. and some of the logical outcomes of that are pretty dystopian. So it's one of the things that gives me pause sometimes, when I'm just kind of deciding strategically which direction to take things on. Like, just because it can be done, is it a good idea? And what is our responsibility to the future? In a way, without sounding too grandiose about it. But, when it comes to royalty sharing schemes and things like that, like there's not enough money in royalties right now to begin with. So if you start sharing them, is that a viable long-term sustainable model, right? Or as an artist, are you unwittingly or wittingly involving yourself in what's essentially a Ponzi scheme? Like, knowing that this thing is not going to work out for some of the people that are in it, and knowing that some of those people that participate in it doesn't work out for are your fans.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's so fascinating. Such a interesting topic of conversation. I know we could chat to you for hours more, but like I said, we got to wrap this, and we like to end every episode of Show Me the Crypto with the same 3 questions we ask every guest. It's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf's going to ask you those questions.
All right, Obie, you ready for this?
Sure.
All right, the first question: who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
I'll go with BT again. Sorry to be boring, but
Yeah, no worries.
But I owe him so much. So yeah, I'll go with that.
Awesome. Well, we've already got the breakdown on the why earlier on. So no, I think that's a totally authentic pick. All right. Second question: what will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
$1 million plus.
Yeah. Love it. We've had a lot of millions, so that's good. That's good.
Yeah, you're above average with that answer.
Yeah.
So,
All right. The third question: what is the most underrated coin or project in all of crypto? And we're gonna
In all of crypto.
Coin or project, so it's not just shilling coins, but it can be whatever you want to.
With the disclaimer that I'm long, significantly long, Polygon, I guess.
Cool.
I think it's underrated. And I don't know how successful some of the evolution of Ethereum is going to be, which means I think projects will keep shedding there. And I think that there's interesting. I'm having a brain fart, but there's Astera, I think it's called, but it's a project where you can stake in favor of your favorite projects in the ecosystem.
Oh, interesting.
And that caught my interest because I've been doing similar things at Record Shop. Like I mentioned, that you can, as a player, you can stake in favor of your artists.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like this new thing that really not too many other projects have explored, this idea of yield for a third party.
Yeah, actually haven't heard that. That sounds really cool.
So I found out about that, and I haven't had as much time as I want to get deep into it, but I think it's pretty cool.
Super interesting. Well, like I said, Obie, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining Ulf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Thank you, guys. I really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.